Sir John, Lady Emma, trustees, friends, scholars, Camilla and I bid you a warm welcome to Rhodes House. I want to do two things. First of all, I would like to welcome two new trustees to the Rhodes Trust, both of whom are with us this evening, both of whom happen to be Rhodes Scholars. So can I welcome Dr. Tariro Makazange, who is Zimbabwe in Balliol, Best College, 1999. Sorry about that. I'm not meant to exhibit any bias. Tariro is a medical scientist whose research focuses on perinatal infected children and adolescents with AIDS and HIV-positive adults. She splits her time between Boston at MGH and a hospital in Zimbabwe, and actually has a new gig, which maybe she'll tell us about. And also like to welcome Professor Alika Bomer, who's South Australia at Large in St. John's, 1985 scholar, who's a professor of world literature and English here, and also the director of TORCH, the Oxford Research and Humanities Institute, and a published author in many topics, including Nelson Mandela. So welcome both Tariro and Alika to the trustees. So I'm going to say almost nothing, except to welcome all of you scholars to your first sort of big evening in Oxford. Actually, you probably had some big evenings already of that variety, but you know, this is in some ways the most fun event, welcoming you all to Oxford. And it helps, it's in many ways the best time for us too, because we get to see this old place through your fresh eyes. And we feel blessed to be part of your journeys. And of course, you've had lots of journey before here, but this is typically a very transformative experience, and it'll be wonderful to share that with you. And we feel very much renewed by your energy and your passion to help create a better world, a more equitable world. And so we're happy to be with you on that journey. Our tradition is to sort of celebrate our fellowship with a toast. And I know toasts are typically done at the end of evenings, but at the end of evenings, most people are ready to get on with their evening. And so we typically do that at the front end. So I am going to introduce our new Dean of the Scholarships, Dr. Nadia Figueroa, many of you met already, to come up and give the toast.
Good night. So each coming up dinner for as long as we can remember, we raise a glass to toast. As you will do yourselves over these coming years, the toast has changed and evolved to speak to what we are mindful of from the past, what we are grateful for in the present, and what we are hopeful for in the future. So please rise and join me. It is due to the initiative of Cecil Rhodes that we are here together celebrating another class of Rhodes Scholars. We do not deny his role in various exploitations, as we do not discount his role in this remarkable opportunity that you've each been given. Let's raise a toast to the words of his favorite quote from Aristotle, inscribed in the rotunda as you enter Rhodes House. Words as appropriate today as they were 2 millennia ago. To activity of the soul, to excellence of character, to the highest good for humankind. We express our gratitude to the generosity of those who have made this transformative experience possible into now its second century, some of whom are in the room with us tonight. We raise a glass to your benefaction, service, and leadership as stewards of the Rhodes Scholarships. And as most of us are guests here in this country, fellow journeymen and journeywomen in Oxford and throughout Britain, we thank the grace and hospitality of our host country and all those here who lend a helping hand to us with care and compassion. And finally, we toast you, Rhodes Scholars of the class of 2016. You have made our lives better by your presence, and may you make the world better through your own initiative, generosity, hospitality, empathy, courage, and fellowship. Cheers.
Good evening, scholars and distinguished guests. Once again, it's a delight on behalf of my fellow trustees to be able to welcome you here as the class of 2016 and to wish each and every one of you the very, very best for your time at Oxford, whatever that may hold as the future unfolds. I want especially this evening, to welcome scholars from a new jurisdiction. The Trust has gradually started to creep out from its British Empire and powers of the day scholarships, to take the scholarship to other parts of the world that were the founder to be alive today, he would have liked to have seen scholars come from. So, this evening, we have with us 4 scholars from China. And on behalf of the trustees, but on behalf of all of us, I want especially to welcome them as the inaugural Chinese Rhodes Scholars. Charles, in his introductory speech, mentioned the fact that the destiny of the Rhodes Trust, the destiny of the scholarships that you enjoy, is very, very dependent upon many, many generous benefactors. So I want, on behalf of the trustees, to thank each and every one of those present tonight who is a benefactor of the Trust for their beneficence, for their support of this magnificent program. But more than that, I want to recognise also that one benefactor in particular has been so generous that he has been accorded the title as of second century founder. And that is our fellow trustee, John McCormack Bain, who, along with his wife, Dr. Marcy McCormack Bain, I celebrate with you this evening and ask you please to rise and drink a toast to our second century founder. The second century founder. Please be seated. Finally from me, Charles also very eloquently introduced our 2 new trustees, Elika and Torero. It's my pleasure now to ask Torero if she would come forward and address the class of 2016. Torero.
Thank you, Sir John Hood. Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. It's truly an honor to be selected to be a trustee, and I can't imagine a better way to serve a scholarship that has been very important to me. I have the difficult task of speaking to you after you've had a fantastic dinner and lots of wine, so I hope I can hold your attention briefly. And I was asked to make a few comments about my experience at Oxford, how I found my time at Oxford, how I got here, and hopefully my story will resonate with some of you, and hopefully you will come to love Oxford, Rhodes House, and the Rhodes Scholarships in the same way that I have grown to over the years. So I'm originally from Zimbabwe. I was a little over 4 years old when Zimbabwe attained its independence. I was part of the generation that benefited from Zimbabwe's independence. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. It was a wonderful time. There was peace and tranquility. I had an excellent educational opportunity, and during that time I became very interested in politics. I grew up at a time when there was a famine in Ethiopia. There was a lot of anti-apartheid activism, a movement to free Nelson Mandela. There were conflicts in Mozambique and Ireland and Palestine. I remember watching Spike Lee movies and learning about New York and the African American experience and listening to the music of Tupac. And I remember that as a child, I thought the world's problems were very solvable. Everything around me was so peaceful and wonderful, and I thought all of these things would be easily solved. But as I grew older, I vividly remember the introduction of a disease into our community that would eventually change our lives. My first recollection of hearing about HIV was probably in the mid-'80s, and listening to the radio with my parents and hearing the news about a disease that was killing gay men in North America. But that seemed quite distant until I was about 16 years old, and I ended up working as a consultant, a youth consultant for UNICEF, and they were developing education programs for school kids in Zimbabwe. Education programs on HIV. And it was during that work that I had the opportunity to meet the first person with AIDS. It was a young woman who was probably about 4 or 5 years older than I was, and she had 2 children. She was very thin, cachectic, the fat in her cheeks had wasted away, her hair was thin and wispy, and she had a very vacant stare in her eyes. And she knew that probably in the next few months she would die and leave behind her children. That experience has never left me. I soon left Zimbabwe. I went to Canada for high school. I went to college at Smith College in Massachusetts. I then went on to medical school in Boston. And as a medical student, I had the opportunity to work with a gay man who was HIV positive. And I got to see the relationship between this gay man and his partner, how much they loved each other and took good care of each other, despite the fact that he had a devastating disease, despite the fact he was taking 20 pills once a day, had bad side effects. They also still had hope, because he had a chance to live, whereas so many of their friends hadn't. That same summer, I went back to Zimbabwe. And sadly, my aunt had HIV, and we took care of her, but she sadly passed away with AIDS. We couldn't afford the drugs that my patient in Boston was able to access. That very same summer, my mother saw an advert in the newspaper, and it was an advert for the Rhodes Scholarships. We had no idea what the Rhodes Scholarships were. I might have had a bit of a clue about its prestige, but I really didn't understand what it stood for. I thought it might be an opportunity for me to be able to study immunology and work towards finding a vaccine for HIV. I submitted my application and was fortunately very successful and became a Zimbabwe Rhodes Scholar. I finished the second year of medical school at Harvard Medical School, and I loved being at Harvard. I had made wonderful friends, but I couldn't help but feel I didn't quite belong there. The beautiful marble buildings housed some of the best minds in medicine in the world, but they felt quite cold and quite distant. My peers, I thought, belonged. They were children of doctors and lawyers and senators, had attended Ivy League schools, and really understood the path that they were about to embark on. In so many ways, I felt like a fish in the wrong pond. And some of you may feel the same way today as you start this journey at Oxford. But I must say, when I arrived here, I had a completely different experience. The gargoyles, the history, the legacies of Oxford were always at the background for me and not at the foreground of my experience. It was here at Oxford that I think I had my first intellectual awakenings. It was here that I felt part of an academic community, a community where I was valued and in which I could make a contribution. I found a research group that was working on an HIV vaccine, developing a vaccine for East Africa, and I worked with them on understanding the basic immunology behind an HIV-specific immune response. I found it was very easy to develop collaborations and found people in the biophysics department who were interested in some of the proteins and the molecules I was studying, and had a wonderful research collaboration with them. I spent time working in Japan and spent a lot of time working in Kenya, and began to understand how collaborative science works and how science in Africa faces a number of challenges. And that experience has been important for me later on as I started to build capacity in research in Africa. I built very strong relationships in the lab. My PhD supervisor continues to be a strong mentor and a strong friend. My lab mates are my collaborators today. They review and critique my work, and they're not just friends and scientific allies, they're people I know I can count on forever. But the relationships extended beyond the lab to Balliol, to Rhodes House, to Africa Society and beyond. I found friendships that shaped me and continue to shape me to this day. I fell in and out of love, as many of you will. I made friends with people from very different backgrounds from mine, but we came together as Rhodes Scholars, as members of Holywell Manor, as Africans in Oxford. I became secretary for the Africa Society at a time when the land invasions were taking place in Zimbabwe, and it was very interesting being a black Zimbabwean in the UK at this particular point in time. One of my fondest memories was organizing a debate with a diversity of opinions around the land issues. I also remember going to the Oxford Union and attending a debate with Ian Smith, who was the last Rhodesian Prime Minister, debating with African nationalists on the merits of independence in Africa. I remember meeting Nelson Mandela. I remember having the courage to challenge Bill Clinton when he came to visit on why he didn't intervene in Rwanda or took so long to intervene. I remember the lively debates late into the night with friends about politics, social justice, literature, art, history, and I developed truly rich friendships that I know will last a lifetime. As I've gotten older and reached different crossroads in my life, those friendships have been very important in making decisions. The people you sit with today will be the friends who will walk with you through various stages of your life. Through graduate school here at Oxford, and for me, it continued through to medical school, becoming an ID, infectious disease physician, building a research lab and a clinic in Zimbabwe and doing academic research between Zimbabwe and Boston. And even now, as I embark on a new chapter in my life and have had to ask myself if the decisions I'm making are correct or incorrect, I turn to my Rhodes Scholar friends and community to get advice on the next steps and whether or not this would be the right decision for me. These friends have inspired me over the years, and collectively we have pushed each other to be the best that we can be, and to continue to live by the ideals of excellence and servant leadership that brought us together right here in Milner Hall all those years ago. This experience will be one of the most profound experiences that you will ever have. You will be challenged and grow in your academic work, but most importantly, you will establish relationships that will challenge you to be the best that you can be. And lastly, at a time when we see a shrinkage in the world order towards tribalism and nativism, it is imperative that us who are profoundly blessed to have the opportunity to interact with those who are different from us, and not only in the level of melanin in our skin, but also in privilege, culture, worldview, politics. We have the opportunity to work together to build a world that's inclusive and just, that calls for an active citizenry that is engaged and speaks truth to power. We should use this profound opportunity not to silence each other at a time when it's tempting for all of us to retreat into like-minded echo chambers, but use this opportunity to create a space where we can express who we truly are and be comfortable that that expression will be challenged in the hope that it will enable us to better understand each other. So congratulations to all of you. This is an exciting journey that you are embarking on. Enjoy your time at Oxford and savor every moment, and stretch yourself beyond your comfort zone. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Torero. This brings to a conclusion the formalities for the evening. The night is yours. Enjoy it and be safe. Thank you very much for being with us.